Hello everybody and welcome to the Roseberry Castle, which I think is the perfect place to talk about the worst vampire movie since Twilight. I think it might even be worse than Twilight. So I went to Morbius and I had no idea what Morbius was about. I just had seen a poster and I'm at the movies, right? In cases like that, it's really important to have a strong storyline, good character development, and not to rely on things or tropes from other superhero or villain movies. So I relied quite a lot on it, and that really was my downfall. Please ignore if you hear any gunshots. The army and police do their shooting in the forests, so I'm not under attack, I promise. The beginning of the film starts off with Michael Morbius, who is in this sort of kids' hospital, and then a new kid comes along who isn't called Milo, he's actually called Lucian, but because all of the other kids before him were called Milo, he also gets the name Milo. So the significant thing for me was that Milo, he was on two crutches and really looked like he was super close to death. Now, Morbius, on the other hand, we didn't really get to see like how sick he was, but he didn't look nearly as sick as Milo did. But Michael Morbius shows some technical skills, so his adoptive father sends him away to some sort of fancy school so that he's going to get a good education and make a really good living from himself and possibly find the cure to their diseases, right? So he gets sent away, and as far as we know, the boys have only known each other for like a week, maybe a bit more. It didn't really seem like it. They didn't seem to age in that time that we got to know them. But the next time we see them, they are adults, and Milo is not on two crutches and looking like he's close to death. He somehow had a miraculous recovery and is now only on one crutch, can walk pretty decently, and doesn't look nearly as frail and sunken-eyed as he did when he was a kid. Morbius, on the other hand, has had an exceptional decline in health. He's now the one who's on two crutches, can barely walk, and looks seriously like he's about to die. So for me, when I saw this, I thought, oh, they've changed identities. Milo has taken over Morbius's identity. Possibly Morbius doesn't want to be in the spotlight. Maybe he's done something crazy as a doctor and now he's given over that role to his adoptive brother. But no, that idea never came up. It just seems that they screwed up when portraying the children and their adult character. So Morbius has become a doctor, and he seems to be a pretty unethical guy, really, from the beginning, because one of the first things that we see him do is take a trip to Brazil in order to catch some bats. And he has three guys who take him on a helicopter to the bat cave so that he can collect his bats. And these guys obviously want their payment. They don't want to be out here too long. They just want to get the job over with and done with. And Morbius, he quite rudely tells them that they'll leave when he's ready, and he only really gives them the money right at the very end when he sort of encourages the bats to come out of the cave. And it's almost implied that the guys were put in serious risk for their lives. And basically, this really gives Morbius this sort of air of being a villain, because he's obviously has a high disregard for these people's lives, and he has this sort of feeling that his work is more important than anything else in the world. Now, obviously, I guess the director would like us to feel that these guys who took him there are just money hungry and not good people at all. But the thing is that why are they there? To make money, because maybe they have a family to feed. Everybody has to make a living. It's not unreasonable to make demands that you should be out of that place before nightfall. in order to protect your health and safety. Like, that's a normal thing that we think about at the workplace, is health and safety. How am I going to stay safe and make bank? Going on to another sort of plot inconsistency. When they're at the caves, Morbius makes this great deal about these bats can really kill, really big creatures, and you see all of these sorts of bones. So for me, it sort of implied that they weren't actually going for the bats. They were going for like some bigger, scarier thing in the cave that the bats wouldn't even dare to touch. So that was what I was expecting. I thought he was going and he was going to collect this massive monster and lure him out of the cage. But no, it's just the bats. He just, for some reason, just could not stop shouting up about how strong the bats were. And then, so the next part that is another assassination of the Morbius character is when he's talking about the experiments that he's going to be doing, and they are obviously very unethical. He's talking about going to international waters to do these experiments, and he has this doctor who is very clearly working under him, so she doesn't really have the same level of power in their sort of working relationship, and she shows a lot of disdain really for what he's doing. He has all of these bats locked up in this sort of almost like aquarium, and he calls it that himself, and she obviously expresses that she's not really happy with what he's doing, and that he's going way too far. But all of a sudden, they get money from this Milo character for some reason, who is extremely wealthy, and he gives them money to go out into the ocean, international waters, and do these illegal experiments in order to create a cure for their disease. And this, I think, is another element that really shows or suggests that he's a villainous character, because most doctors and most people would hope and expect that any sort of medical development will be done in an ethical manner and in a way that isn't going to bring harm to other people. But he doesn't seem to care about that at all, and he's going to do whatever he wants in order to get the results that he wants, really in order to save himself, right? So after this, he does the experiment. He turns into like this vampire bat, and he has infused his DNA with bat DNA, and basically he's Batman, but he's not Batman. And he kills some of the workers on the boat, and the really strange thing about that was that nobody seemed to really care that these guys died, and they called them, toy soldiers, implying that they were really awful people. And sure, one of them was shown as like the sexist guy, but do sexist guys deserve to die? Not really. Like, they are, he's out there trying to make a living. So then the next plot hole, I think, is that we're expected to believe that Morbius is actually a good character, and after this experiment he realizes that it's this big mistake, and he can't possibly give this cure to other people, especially not his adoptive brother Milo. And during this time, it's not really shown that he's not a villainous character, because he keeps on doing these experiments about which blood he drinks, artificial blood or real blood, and he's not sort of making any sort of plans in order to amend what he's done. Because really, if he thinks that what he's done is completely terrible and that he's at risk of going around and killing a lot of people, then the logical thing would be for him to kill himself. If he's turned himself into this horrible being and he knows that he's already killed people, then the ethical thing to do would be for him to get rid of himself and get rid of all the work that he's done, so that nobody else can repeat it. But he never even considers it. His adoptive brother, however, is suddenly turned into this villainous character, which he wasn't shown at all to be before. And he demands the cure, and in the end he turns himself into this vampire Batman creature. But there wasn't any sort of character development gave us a good understanding of how he became this selfish, villainous person who was going to take the research and use it for his own gains. It's not explained at all. So we're just expected to just accept that he all of a sudden has like a psychotic break and just becomes this really awful person. But it really didn't seem at all like that was really any part of the storyline until they suddenly decided that it would be. Another plot twist that kind of really doesn't make sense and it really shows sort of a shallowness of the characters that they created, that his female doctor counterpart, she suddenly is interested in a romantic relationship once he's turned into this evil killing vampire man. And that really to me doesn't make any sense at all, because if you know that he's this awful being who really needs to be stopped, then she herself should realize that she can't have any sort of life with him. So why is she only now starting to get into a relationship with him? And in a sense, I would say that what they're basing her reaction on is a deep character flaw, that she has some sort of personality disorder that means that now that Morbius looks a lot healthier and, sure, he's evil and everything like that, but she's still wanting to get into a relationship with him now. One thing that I can't get over, and I guess this has a lot to do with me having no idea where Morbius comes from and had done no research before I watched the movie, is that it really brings up the question, who is Batman? Because Batman, the real Batman, doesn't have any sort of physical superpowers. He's just styled himself that out of his own interactions with the Bat community. But Morbius, however, is literally Batman. He has bat DNA in him. He can fly. He can do sonar. He can drink blood and get energy from that, just like the bats. But we are kind of in a situation where it feels like the real Batman has been shown to be a complete fake. And that part of the film I will never get over. The whole character itself, I think, should never really have existed in the context that Batman does exist as he is now. The final plot hole that I want to talk about is the ending, where a character from the Spider-Man universe, he shows up and he actually says that he's from Spider-Man. And the strange thing is that Morbius just accepts that, and that part I really don't understand, because that sort of implies that he does know who Spider-Man is. But nowhere in the film do they talk about superheroes or people with other powers, villainous or good. So when you're watching the movie, it feels like you're in this vacuum where this thing is really about technology and science, and it isn't anywhere in this sort of superpower universe. But suddenly, at the very end of the film, it is in this universe. And surprise, there's going to be a lot of other characters who have superpowers. And that part really lost me. It really seemed like they wanted us to feel like this movie was in sort of the usual universe that we live in now, but in the end it was not. It was in the Spider-Man universe. That's all for today, folks. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. Give it a like, subscribe, do whatever, and I will see you guys all next time. Hey door.